All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most mind-bending mysteries in all of science, the Double Slit Experiment. For basically a century, it's had physicists scratching their heads. But what if the solution is actually way simpler than we've been led to believe?
See, this is the question at the very heart of the whole thing. It seems like a single photon, or an electron, can be both a spread-out wave and a tiny, distinct particle at the same time. It's a paradox that seems to break our everyday understanding of how reality should work. But maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question all along.
So, to really get why this is such a famous riddle, we've got to quickly go over the classic experiment. The setup itself is actually super simple, but the results, well, they're anything but.
This is where your brain starts to hurt a little. Okay, so when you fire particles, let's say electrons, at two slits, but you don't look to see where they're going, they create this beautiful interference pattern on the other side. You know, like ripples in a pond. They act like waves, but, and this is the wild part, the moment you stick a detector on one of the slits to see which one it goes through, that pattern completely vanishes. All of a sudden, they act like tiny little baseballs, creating just two solid bands.
And that right there is the billion-dollar question. How on earth does the universe seem to know that we're watching? The standard line in quantum mechanics is that the act of observing collapses the wave function, forcing it to pick a side. But let's be honest, that's always felt a little bit like magic. What if there's a much more straightforward explanation? So this brings us to a really fascinating new framework that offers a solution. It's called the Dewey corpus, and it imagines the universe not as a stage full of mysterious objects, but as this enormous information-preserving system, kind of like a cosmic ledger that keeps track of everything.
The whole idea is built on something called the phi field. Just imagine it as the basic fabric of, well, everything. In this picture, particles and waves aren't actually two different things. They're just different kinds of rhythms or oscillations happening within this one single universal field.
And this is the core idea that changes everything. There is no duality. There's only the phi loop. It's this single thing, a self-looping rhythm in the field. We just happen to perceive this one phenomenon in two different ways, depending on how we interact with it. So it's not a particle and a wave, it's just a phi loop.
And here's where the bookkeeping comes in. This field has a perfect memory system, and it's called the ledger. Every single interaction, every event that ever happens gets recorded, and nothing is ever lost or deleted. You can really think of it as the universe's own indestructible hard drive. Okay, so now that we have these three ideas, the field, the loop, and the ledger, let's go back and run the double slit experiment one more time and see how this new way of looking at it just makes the whole paradox melt away.
Okay, here's how it plays out. First, a phi loop, one of those field rhythms, gets sent out from the source. Second, that rhythm spreads out and its influence passes through both slits at the same time. No big deal. Third, the rhythms from the two paths overlap and interfere. But here's the twist. Cancellation doesn't mean information is lost. It just creates a void and the ledger records that it happened. Fourth, the combined influence of that whole field hits the detector screen and writes one single entry in the ledger. That's what we see as a particle hit. And fifth, this is the absolute key. If we measure a slit, all we're doing is forcing an early entry into the ledger. That action separates the two paths in the universe's books before they even have a chance to interfere.
So, you see, there's no mysterious collapse. The interference pattern doesn't vanish because the wave suddenly got shy. It vanishes simply because our measurement changed the accounting. We forced the universe to log the event as two separate line items instead of one combined total. It's just record keeping.
Now, let's put these two explanations right next to each other to make the difference really pop. On one side, you have the classic quantum paradox, and on the other, you have this new, unified view that's all about information. I mean, you can see it plain as day right here. Standard quantum mechanics is all about this weird duality and a random collapse that we can't really explain. The Dewey corpus just sweeps that away and replaces it with one thing, the phi loop, in a clear process called ledger transcription. Instead of information just disappearing, it gets recorded in a void. An observation isn't some magical act. It's just writing an early record in the logbook.
So why does this matter so much? Why is it so powerful? Well, because it takes the exact same experimental results that have baffled scientists for 100 years and gives us a framework for understanding them that's actually whole and, intuitive.
The advantages here are pretty clear. First, it gets the same answers as standard quantum mechanics, so it fits all the data perfectly. But it's so much cleaner as an idea. It's one process, not two bizarrely different behaviors. It also conserves information, which is something physicists absolutely love. Nothing just vanishes into thin air. And finally, it totally demystifies measurement. It's just us, the observers, getting access to a ledger entry that was being written anyway.
You know, the real beauty of this idea is that the universe isn't being forced to choose. It doesn't have to be a wave or a particle. Instead, every single part of the event is kept, saved forever, logged in the permanent records of the phi field.
And that leaves us with one last, absolutely fascinating question to chew on. If this view is right, if every interaction, every possibility, every single outcome is eternally recorded in some kind of cosmic ledger, what does that imply about our past, our future, and the very fabric of reality itself?